transition to my PowerPoint. Right. And you can let me know if there's any problem. If you can't see me, if you can't hear me, if you can't see the slides that I'm talking about, please let me know and I can go ahead and fix that. But this is our Saving for College with 529's presentation. It should last about an hour. We're going to go over a lot of information tonight about saving for college in general and specifically using 529s to do so. Before we get into that topic, I just want to let you know who we are. We're MEFA, the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. We are a state authority and were created by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts back in 1982 with a public service mission to help families to plan, save, and pay for college. And we do that in a variety of ways. If you want to see all the ways in which we do that, you can go to MEFA.org, which I will be referencing on numerous occasions during this presentation tonight, or you can follow us on our social channels. We offer low fixed interest rate educational loans. We offer savings programs like the Massachusetts 529, which I will talk about. And we have free guidance from college going experts. So if you have any questions between now, I know we have a lot of families with young children. So between now and the time your child goes to college or figure out what they're going to do after high school, you're going to have questions. Please think of us as we are, which is a free resource for you to consult with any questions that you may have on that entire process. Whoop, I went too far. So what we're going to talk about today, sort of generally speaking, actually, before I get into that, I want to encourage you to, if you have questions, to submit them through the Q&As. I know when you registered, you were asked to list, some things that you wanted to know from this presentation, and I was looking over that earlier, and I do plan to answer those questions. But if questions come up, as they will, please submit them through the Q&A. My colleague Epilila is here from MEFA, and she'll be answering those questions and possibly breaking through to let me know of some common questions that maybe should be heard by everyone. So I want this to be as interactive as you want it to be. It should run about an hour. I'll be here after as well if you have any questions. So if there's a question that you want to save until afterwards, I'll be here for that. So having said that, what we're going to talk about tonight mainly, first of all, why saving for college is important. And I think you have an idea that it is, or you wouldn't be here on a beautiful night inside watching me speak about it. But we'll talk about exactly why that is and just stress how important it is. And we'll talk about 529 plans, of course, in general, what they are at a national level, when they were created, and what they're here to do. We'll talk about the Massachusetts 529 plan, which is the MEFA U Fund, and the various features. And then we will talk about strategies for saving, right? So what are some ways that families have had success saving for college, especially using 529s, and what are some ways you can do that? And now finally, I like to end by talking about how families actually do pay for post-secondary education. And what that means when I say post-secondary education, I just mean anything, again, that comes after high school. So college, yes, but not just college. So career training could be part of that. These are all wrapped in with 529s. Of course, the idea is not that every child has to go to college, but whatever your child is going to do after high school, we want them to be in a good position to succeed. And the most common question that I have received over my many years at MEFA from families is, how do people pay for college? Nobody really knows how families do this until they get to the point where they're applying to colleges and filing financial aid forms and just sort of wondering how people do this. So we're going to talk about some ways that people do it and some resources that you can think about. Okay. Now, why saving is important? Well, one of the most important thing probably that I'd like to leave you with is just some myths that we've heard about saving for college that prevent people or delay people from starting to save for college when it should not. And the very first one that we hear all the time is my savings will hurt my financial aid. So people are very concerned that if they start putting money away for college, that colleges are going to see that and say, oh, okay, well, we were going to give you this $10,000 scholarship, but I see you have this college fund here, so we're not going to give you that. That really doesn't happen. And, financial aid, we will talk about this in a little bit more detail. The financial aid is kind of something that is difficult to talk a little bit about. But generally speaking, financial aid is awarded in two ways. Merit-based, meaning scholarships, academic scholarships, athletic scholarships. Those things are not affected at all by how much you have saved. Most financial aid is need-based, and that is determined by your family finances. And so your savings are going to be part of that picture. And again, I'll have a little bit more information on this in a slide later on. But the truth of the matter is that income, and typically parent income, is the biggest factor in determining your financial aid eligibility and not your savings. So your savings will help you when it comes time to pay for college. And, there's a whole formula when you're graduating from high school and applying to colleges, and you're filling out the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid or any other financial aid forms that you might be filing, and they're going to take all of your financial information and put it through a formula. Your savings count for a very low percentage in that process. Most of it is based on income. So your college savings really won't impact your financial aid in most cases in any significant way. The second myth that we've heard about saving for college is that it's not worth saving for college if I can't save the entire cost. We know that the cost of college, tuition, fees, room, board, books, supplies, all that stuff that we all hear about can be very, very large, right? And so it's easy to sort of hear that, as we often hear it on the news or read it somewhere, and think, there's no way I can save for that. And I'll tell you from my life, when my son was born 11 years ago, I remember my colleague said, let's see in 18 years how much college is going to be for your son. And we have a future cost of college calculator on MEFA.org. And she calculated in, and I remember seeing that figure for 4 years, what it was going to cost, and having a mini panic for a minute and thinking, oh my God, there's no way I can save that amount. And that there might not be, but then I remembered that that's probably not the amount that I'm actually going to be asked to pay. So there is financial aid available. There's a lot of financial aid available. That sticker price of the most expensive college in your area is not necessarily the target that you may want to have when you're saving. So the truth is that everything that you have saved is something that you don't have to borrow, right? And so your savings will actually help you. This is the main point that I want to stress. It will give you more education options as far as colleges with different prices, but also other programs like semesters abroad or specialized programs like that may sort of increase your scope. I was just reading a book this morning, and a student talked about that they had so many more options because they had their parents had saved in a 529 for them. The biggest draw, I think, for most people is that it will reduce or hopefully even eliminate the need to borrow loans. Of course, student debt is a huge story, and it's an important story. So savings can definitely offset that and hopefully eliminate it altogether. And as we mentioned, it has a minimum impact on financial aid eligibility. And then finally, this goes back to even having saved a little bit helps. Anything that you saved helps. There are studies that have been done on 529 plans that show that students who have 529s set up for them and know that they have 529s set up for them, regardless of the amount, even below $500 in there, have a much greater college attendance and graduation. So it has an outsized impact on students attending college and graduating college, regardless of the amount saved. And also, regardless of the socioeconomic status. So this benefits all income levels. That's not just for upper income folks, it's low to middle income students as well. So I love talking about savings because savings is just good across the board. It's important to talk about borrowing. It's important to talk about aid. It's important to talk about those things. But savings is great because it's just good. If you can do it, great. Even a little bit helps a lot. So saving is important. And what are 529 plans? What we're going to talk about tonight. 529 plans have become sort of the investment, college savings or college investment vehicle of choice for many families. They were created back in 1996, signed into law by then President Clinton, and they were created to offer families a tax advantaged way at the federal level to save for college. It was strictly for college at that point. It's been expanded. And one of the themes, we'll get into it, but one of the themes of 529s since they were created has been greater and greater expansion. So they were created at the federal level, and then every state was then sort of tasked with creating its own 529 plan. So every state did that. In Massachusetts, MEFA is proud to offer the Massachusetts 529 plan or the U Fund. So some features, since each state sort of creates their own, are across the board, the same for every 529, but some may be different from state to state. So, the account limit, how much you can have in a 529 account will differ from state to state. Of course, the investment options, because this is an investment vehicle, are going to be different from state to state. And then tax policies too. What kind of distributions are taxable and under what circumstances, and tax, deductions you can claim, et cetera. Different states have different policies on those things. So I'll try to be clear when I'm talking about the U Fund specifically, or how it works with the U Fund, and if that can be extrapolated to other 529s as well.
Uh, Jonathan, we just have a
Yes.
question in the chat. Will investment plans and strategies based on a child's age be discussed in this webinar?
I didn't write it in, but I can talk about it briefly. And what I would say is that MEFA has contracted, and I'll talk about them in a little bit, with Fidelity Investments to offer the investments and to service the account for the U Fund. This is a question that I would pretty much refer to Fidelity. So, and then if you're going through another 529, whoever the program manager is for that. But there are different types of investments, and one of them is age-based. And what that means is that folks who invest your money are going to be basing their investment on when your child will need that money. So they're going to start off investing if your child is very young in maybe a more aggressive way. And then as your child gets older and closer to being able to use the funds or needing to use the funds, they're going to start to transfer those investments over to more conservative options so that they won't suffer sort of ups and downs in the market before they have to use them. So that is an option with the U Fund for sure, the age-based portfolio. And it's a popular one. So hopefully that answers some of your questions. But if you have further questions about it, because there certainly is more to say, I would recommend that you speak with Fidelity or whoever manages the investments of the 529 plan that you're considering or currently use.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I know there was a question beforehand about 529s versus different types, other types of savings programs. And so I just wanted to sort of give you the lay of the land here over some of the options that we have. And this is from MEFA.org. So if you wanted to go and visit this chart and see it in its entirety, you can go to MEFA.org and look for the savings comparison chart there. There's the link to it or the URL. You see 5 different types. First one being the U-Plan prepaid tuition program, which is another MEFA offering. It's not a 529 plan, it's a prepaid tuition plan. The second one is the MEFA U Fund College Investing Plan. The third are custodial accounts, UGMA or UTMA accounts. And that stands for Uniform Gift to Minor Act or Uniform Trust to Minor Act. So different types of account. and then a Coverdell ESA account. And this is the one that was specifically asked about, a 529 versus a Coverdell. And then the last one is just a taxable account, which is the regular savings account. I'm gonna say this. Um, we're talking about 529s and what makes 529 so powerful tonight. The best way to save is the way that you actually do save. So, if you find the vehicle that's best for you, then go for it. I think if you're looking at this here, um, specifically to contrast 529s and Coverdells, the biggest difference between 529s and Coverdells is that there is a $2,000 limit to how much you can put in a Coverdell every year, and that's the limit. 529s have a much higher limit for what you can put in, and actually you can't actually open a Coverdell unless you're below a certain income level. That's sort of spelled out right there. Um, and they're different programs. They just have sort of different restrictions built into them, the 529s. I think they were an attractive option when they could be used for K through 12 education, and 529s could not, but now 529s can, and we'll talk about that later on. But if you have any further questions about that, maybe I can help you out. But if you want to just take a look at a high level and compare these different types of vehicles, that's the site to do so right there.
Jonathan, we have a question in the chat along the lines of that last slide. So
Yep.
if a parent or parents move or live in multiple states, are they able
Mhm.
to open and fund multiple 529 or custodial accounts?
Um, Yes, I believe so. Just because you live in one state doesn't mean you have to use the 529 of that state. So you can open up different accounts in different ones. Um, I don't know about being the owner of different 529 accounts. I don't remember there being a problem with that, but I want to look into it before I say exactly yes or no.
Great,
But you can
thank
have
you.
different types of accounts. So you can have covered up accounts and 529s and UGMA or UPMA accounts as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Another question that I know some of you had is how 529s work with financial aid. And so I said we were going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, and this is where it is. Um, when you're filing a FAFSA, and I know there were a few specific mentions of the FAFSA. Um, the FAFSA will ask, and whatever financial aid form you're filing will ask you to list your financial information to determine how much financial aid you're eligible to receive. And so that the way they do that is they ask for parent income, parent assets, student income, student assets, the number of people in the household, maybe some other information, taxes paid, etc. They'll pull in your tax information from the IRS. And they're going to take all of that information, what you have saved, what properties you own other than your primary residence, investments that you have, including 529s. They'll take all that information and put it through the formula, and it's going to come out with this number called the SAI, the Student Aid Index. That is the amount that the formula calculates that you as a family are to absorb for a year of college. So they're sort of determining how much your need is. So, of course, if you want financial aid, you want that number to be low, right? You want to have a low student aid index. So they say, okay, you're only responsible to pay, $2,000 or $5,000 or zero. So the lower your student aid index, the more financial aid that you're eligible to receive. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to receive it, but that, you're eligible to receive it. So, in this formula, we're assuming that 529s owned by the parent are looked at as parent assets and not student assets. Now, this might set off an alarm bell for you, but that's actually better in terms of financial aid because parent assets are only looked at 5.6% of the total assets. So if you have $50,000 saved in a 529, they're going to take 5.6% of that and say, okay, we're going to expect you to pay this $2,800 because you have $50,000 saved in a 529. And a 529 is treated just as any other asset. So they're going to take the total of all those assets for the parent and take 5.6% of it, and that's what you're going to pay from assets. So I think if you thought about it, so does it affect your financial aid? It can, but I think you'd rather have the $50,000 on hand to pay and asked to be, and sort of have your student aid index higher by $2,800. So it affects financial aid very minimally. And the other thing is if you have multiple 529, so if you have three children, for example, and you have a 529 for each child, um, when you're filing a FAFSA, let's say for that first child, you're only going to be listing the value of the 529 account for that child. That's actually a change. It didn't used to be that way. You used to have to sort of um, put all of your 529s onto one FAFSA because the thought was you could change beneficiaries over, et cetera. But now you don't have to do that. So financial aid treatment of 529s is very, very lenient, which just makes it, again, a really powerful way to save for college. So it should not, delay you or prevent you from starting to save at all. So now we're going to talk about the Massachusetts U Fund. So we sort of talked about burnishing 529 plans as a great tool for use and how they are so flexible and they don't affect financial aid all that much. And so, as I said, each state has their own 529 plan. The MEFA U Fund is for Massachusetts. And we like to point this out because it was a real great moment for us after many years. And I know many of you have questions about, well, how do I pick which 529 plan to invest in? Do I have to go with the one in my state? You don't have to go with the one in your state. You go with the one that you like the best. But one of the things that you might want to think about is what are the investments? How are the investments performing? And we're very proud that that the MEFA U Fund is one of only 5 states 529s with a gold medal rating from Morningstar. So we're that's the very top, and we're really happy about that. And as I mentioned before, our investments are professionally managed by Fidelity Investments. So we've contracted with Fidelity to again manage the investments and also service the account. So I have a couple of 529 accounts with the U Fund through Fidelity, and so I have to call or talk to Fidelity every once in a while, and they've always been fantastic. So I always tell the story when I needed to set one up really early in the morning for a gift on a Saturday. I was able to call, get somebody on the phone, and have them help me through. So they're really important partners for us. And if you have questions about, the application or your investments, you should speak with Fidelity. Now, how the U Fund actually works is this. You would open an account at fidelity.com/ufund and you would put funds in. There's no minimum to get started. So you can open up an account with very little money or no money at all and fund it later. But when you do put funds in, it's invested. And it's invested in the market by Fidelity. And it grows with the market and it grows tax deferred. So there's no taxes on the earnings as you are investing. That's the first benefit. As I mentioned, there's no annual account maintenance fee or minimum investment. Annual account maintenance fee would be a fee that you need to pay out of pocket every year to be a part of the U Fund. There isn't any of that. It's not going to cost you anything out of your pocket. There are fees associated with the U Fund, as there are with every 529, but the fees are taken out of the earnings of the investments. So, and as I mentioned, as someone who has had a U Fund for many, many years, I don't know what my fees are. So it's just not something that you really notice unless you want to look for it. You do have to go through and pick your investment options, and this maybe goes to your question about age-based portfolios. You can pick an age-based portfolio. You can custom pick your portfolio from Fidelity's options. So there's a lot of different routes to choose from there. And there are FDIC insured portfolios as well. So, if you are really concerned that you may lose some of the principal that you put in, you can invest in that bank deposit portfolio, which is insured up to $250,000. But again, I cannot stress this enough. I'm not a market person. I don't know anything about the market. MEFA in general, we don't give any market advice or explanations really. If you have questions about how you should invest, especially if you are like me, not really a seasoned investor, let's say, you can talk to Fidelity and they can guide you through that process and get a feel for, sort of your tolerance to certain types of risk um, and what may be important to you and maybe it's just going by the age of your child again. So but that is something that you'll have to go through and you know choose your investment option. Now, I mentioned that since you're in Massachusetts, you don't have to invest in the Massachusetts U Fund. This is true. Also, you don't have to use the funds at a Massachusetts college. That's a question we get sometimes. Savings can be used at any accredited college or university nationwide, and even some international colleges if they are set up to take U.S. federal funding. You can use your 529 funds that way and still retain your tax benefits. Annual contribution limits are $19,000 per year or $38,000 per year for married couples filing jointly. So this is the gift tax limit. So you can put more funds in, but over 19,000 for individuals or 38,000 for married couples, you would incur a gift tax on that amount. And then there's a $500,000 account limit. So no additional contributions once the beneficiary has a combined account maximum of $500,000. And combined account maximum means this. If I have a 529 account for my son and my mother has one for my son as well, he has two over two different owners, right, for the same student. Those accounts together, that account limit is $500,000. So once that reaches 500,000, you can't put any more in. I wish you all that problem. It's not a problem that most people have, but it would be a good problem to have. So essentially, you put the funds in, they grow tax deferred. But again, another key benefit for this is once you take the funds out, as long as you use them for qualified education expenses, you don't pay any taxes on the earning. So that's really the full picture of the tax advantage of the U Fund. It's a tax advantage way to save for college or education. So, what are qualified education expenses? Tuition, fees, housing and food, books and equipment at any eligible institution in the United States or worldwide if they take U.S. federal funding. So any college, uh, in the country or internationally, you can use for these expenses. Doesn't actually even have to be used for college, right? So you can use these funds for um, vocational training programs, as long as the institution at which you're taking those programs is an eligible institution that is, able to receive federal funding from the U.S. government. And there's been a recent expansion. Remember, I said that the story of 529 has really been the story of expanding benefits. A recent expansion for you can use up to $10,000 annually towards the cost of apprenticeships and up to $10,000 annually for tuition for private and public K through 12 education. That's just something that I actually took advantage of this year for my son. And you can use the funds for a one-time disbursement of up to $10,000 to pay student loans. So all expansions in 529s, these are all qualified educational expenses that you can use your 529 funds to pay. So a couple of questions that people often have about 529s. What happens if I take money out for ineligible expenses? Um, so again, let's say things don't quite work out before I even get to taking money out. What happens if your child doesn't go to college? Or what happens if you started this fund and you can't really use it the way you intended? You have a couple of options. The first thing is you can hold onto these accounts for a really long time. So if your student finishes high school, they don't know what they want to do, they don't go directly into college, you're not quite sure, you can hold on to that account almost indefinitely. Um, if that sibling decides to do something, enter straight into the workforce or what have you, Those funds could also be transferred over. That account could be transferred over to another beneficiary within the family. So that is an option. And again, if they choose a vocational training program, you may be able to use the funds for that. If none of those things work out and you have to take funds out for ineligible expenses, so not as they were intended to be used, then there is a penalty for that. And so the penalty is that the earnings are taxed at your rate of income, so you lose that sort of tax break. And there's a 10% penalty, again, on the earnings. So all the penalties are on the earnings and not what you put in. But those are what they are. So 10% penalty on the earnings, and they're taxed at your rate of income. There are exceptions for the 10% penalty, which are death and disability of the student, which we obviously don't even really want to think about, but also scholarship. So if you get a scholarship, and once again, you can't use the funds the way that you intended, um, you have to draw them out, then you're not assessed a 10% penalty on that scholarship amount. But in even those three examples, the earnings still will be taxed at the owner's rate of income. How we doing, Epilila? Do we have any other questions?
One, you touched on the scholarship questions. That was great. One other question that came in, can the principal that has been put into the U fund be taken out without being taxed at the federal or state level? And how is principal versus growth determined?
So you can take those funds out, but they are, again, depending on how you use them, they may have they may have taxable consequences, right? So if you used it to buy a boat or something, you can take it out, but there's going to be a 10% penalty assessed on the earnings, and then the earnings will be taxed at your rate of income. The second question, I'm not quite sure, but if they're used for a qualified educational expense, then you just take it out and you don't pay any taxes on. The second question, I'm not quite sure. Can you repeat it?
How is principal versus growth determined?
Oh, and in terms of, okay, the amount, the principal, the amount that you put in, is what is untaxed or unpenalized. The earnings on that investment would be the figure that is assessed, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
one other question, can you just, and I don't know if you're going to do this a little bit later, but can you just
Hmm.
speak to um, whether or not you have control of the investment strategy once you open a 529 account, or you just sort of go with the algorithm that has been established?
Yeah, sure. So I don't talk too much about the investment strategies, but you do have options as far as when you're going through the 529 application. The very last thing you do is choose your investment strategy. And there's two basic ways you can go for that. The first one is an age-based portfolio, and the second is a custom strategy or custom portfolio. If you choose custom, you have your sort of offerings from Fidelity. So you can't just say, I want to invest in Apple or something. It's got to be within the portfolios that Fidelity offers. So again, you can consult with them on which one may be best for you. But if you wanted to sort of pick your own options, you can do that from what they offer. And then if you're going through the age-based strategy, you basically have a few, like three different options that you can choose from. And those options sort of differ on how aggressively they're going to be moving funds around, in the account. So that's what I will say about that.
Great, thank you. And
Yeah,
then
yeah, thanks. Mhm.
another question just came in, so we might as well just throw one
Yeah.
more in the mix.
Oh, and incidentally, before you ask, I want to say I did find you can have more than one 529. I don't know why I got skittish about answering that, but you can own more than one 529 plan for the same beneficiary if you're moving around quite a bit. That's fine. So that
Thank
was a
you.
question from earlier, but yes, go ahead.
So, another question just came in too, but they're pretty related. So, are you fund plans owned by and contributed to by grandparents counted as assets? And then along those lines, can another family member open a 529 for my child? So,
Oh yeah, those are great questions, and yes, I didn't know if I was going to get to that or not, but I should have addressed it because I know people were asking about it. Yes, you can. It does not have to be the owner. The parent does not have to be the owner, so it can be a grandparent, can be an aunt or an uncle, could be a friend, could be anybody. It doesn't have to be a specific relation to the student, is what it is. And then for grandparents, no. So grandparent information is not looked at in terms of financial aid. So if grandparents are the owners of the account, it is not looked at as an asset as it would be if it was, a parent asset. And there used to be a stipulation again, if it, once you used it, that it would count as student income in the following year. And student income is counted at 50% versus 5.6%. So people have to be really careful about how they do that. That's not the case anymore. So you really just kind of miss it altogether in terms of financial aid from grandparents.
Perfect.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you. Oh, it's okay. So this is another big deal that happened recently. This is the 529 to Roth IRA transfer. So I know that this is something that people are asking about, and I think this is maybe a year or two ago. This was passed into law. When we're talking about opening 529 accounts for children who are really young, one of the most common questions is, well, I don't know what's going to happen with them. What if they don't end up going to college? Am I going to get hit with taxes if I take the funds out? And so this is something that really means a lot to people. They've introduced this provision that you can now transfer unused 529 funds into a Roth retirement IRA for the student. So people really like this provision, and so it's very popular. It's great. The Roth, there's a lot of sort of stipulations to it, so they want to make sure that people are using it as it was intended, right? In that way that I described. I started saving for college. It's not really going to work out that way. Let me, use it for my child's retirement instead. So the Roth IRA must be for the same beneficiary that the 529 plan was set up for. So that's the first one. The account has to have been open for at least 15 years. So you have to have it for 15 years before you do it. The transfer amount must have come from contributions made at least 5 years prior. So they don't want people putting money in and then just rolling it right over. Again, let's think about our story of opening the account and putting funds in over years and years and years and then not being able to use it. The amount transferred annually is limited to the Roth IRA contribution limit, which is currently $7,000 per year. So that's the amount that you can transfer over every year. And the lifetime transfer limit cannot, as of right now, exceed $35,000. We have a blog post on this. Just to tell you how popular it is, according to the 2024 College Savings Indicators study, 48% of respondents were not aware that 529 funds could be rolled over to a Roth IRA. But again, people are really, really interested once they hear that. Again, this goes back to savings just being good, right? So you have these funds, it's just going to help. So, as with any tax question, though, we do have to say that we are not tax professionals, we're not tax preparers. If you have questions about the taxability or tax law regarding these things, you should speak with your financial advisor or your tax preparer. But that's the most recent sort of expansion of 529 uses. Apelila, is there a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so let's go with this first question because it's a sort of a follow-up with the Roth IRA. So can you elaborate
Mhm.
more on 529 accounts must have been open for at least 15 years, and the transfer amount from contributions made at least 5 years. So can you just clarify those two
Yeah.
stipulations just a little bit, please?
Sure. So, and this is I looked this up beforehand. I'm wondering if this is retroactive. It is not, from what I understand, retroactive. But you have to have had the 529 account open for 15 years at least before transferring any funds over to a Roth IRA. So again, they don't really want this to be a way for people to, open a 529 and then just the next day transfer funds over to a Roth IRA. This is for folks who have opened an account for a child, been saving for years and years, and then when it comes time to go to college, it's not going to work out. They shouldn't be penalized. Let's let them help their children in a different way and allow them to transfer these funds over to a Roth IRA. So the 529 has to have been created for the child for at least, has to have been in existence for at least 15 years before you transfer any of those funds over to a Roth IRA. And again, any money that you transfer over has to have been in there for at least 5 years before you do so. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say, how else to further elaborate it, but and this is pretty new. So, and since it's not retroactive, I think it means that people have not done this yet. So, but that's my understanding of how that works. I mean, does that make sense? Is there any further detail I can provide, or
N nope,
I
that's
don't
perfect.
know. Okay.
And then we have another follow-up question to that. Is the maximum amount of 35,000 a lifetime maximum?
Yes. Is that from the 529? Yeah, they can't exceed the 35,000.
Perfect. Okay. And then our last question, this is just again related to you know, doing something else with your 529 funds. So in the
Hmm.
case of using the funds for something else or a death or
Hmm.
disability or scholarship, and it was a grandparent's account, who is paying the taxes or penalties um on the account if to access those funds?
Right. So any tax um, comes at the back end. So how the funds were used, this would go towards the owner of the account.
Great. Thank you.
But I should stress again, we're not tax professionals. If you have tax questions, reach out to your tax preparer and, don't, we're not tax professionals. So that's what I was saying, not giving tax advice per se. Please don't think that. Okay, one thing I want to mention too is baby steps. And baby steps is the first statewide seeded 529 program in Massachusetts. It was launched back on January 1st of 2020 by the Massachusetts State Treasurers and MEFA. And essentially this sets aside $50 for every child born in Massachusetts or adopted in Massachusetts, which they have 1 year to claim by opening a 529 account. Um, so we're very excited about this program. You see programs like this popping up a lot now in various states, various cities. There's a similar program in the city of Boston. Maine has a similar program, as does Rhode Island and Pennsylvania. So California has a few of them. They're getting very, very popular. They're called CSAs, Child Savings Account programs. So if you are perhaps eligible to claim your $50, if you have a child who's newborn and not turned one or just adopted a child and within that first year of adoption, or know somebody who is or will be if they're pregnant, then you may want to let them know about baby steps. So we're again just trying to promote college savings. As we know, it's sort of a general good. Not just college savings, but savings for anything that your child may do after high school, and trying to sort of foster that culture within the state. So it's been very successful, and we're very happy and very proud to be doing that. So just something I like to mention in case you are or know anyone who is eligible. That's baby steps. They can Google baby steps or go to MEFA.org and look up baby steps and figure out how to open that up. One final benefit I'll give you on the U Fund, and this is something that happens in various states. Many states offer tax deductions for contributions to their 529s, and so Massachusetts does that as well. So contributions to your U Fund are Massachusetts state tax deductible up to $2,000 for married filers filing jointly, or up to $1,000 for individual filers. Those limits are per filer, not per account. So if you have 3 children and you give 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, you're still only eligible to deduct 2,000. But it is a deduction, and it's something that you can claim again on your state taxes. Just again, further sort of boost savings. If you're not in Massachusetts, check with your state. You may have a similar program. And this is one of those things that's going to vary from state to state to state. So some may have it, some may not have it, may have a very generous one, some may have it for contributions to states outside of your own 529 plan, which I think there was at least one of those, which I kind of couldn't believe. But but typically it's for your state's program. So according to a 2024 CSI study, 66% of respondents said they would be more likely to save if Massachusetts offered a tax deduction. We do. So again, just another incentive to save. And so the more we can get the word out about that, the better. I know some folks asked about how you can sign up for a 529 plan. I can tell you what you would need to sign up for a U fund. And this is the information before you get started that you are going to need. And I've sat next to folks who are opening up 529 plans and U funds. So I know that it really helps to have all the information before you start doing that. So for the owner, and this is kind of a good time to talk about that owner, right? So the first decision that you have to make when you are setting up a 529 plan is who is going to be the owner. And that's important because the owner is the only person that can direct funds out of the account, right? They have full control of the account. So that can be a parent. It often is. It doesn't have to be. It can be a grandparent. It can be another adult, whoever that is. They do have to be over 18. So the student is not the owner of the account. It's got to be an adult over 18. That person needs to supply their name, social security number or EIN, date of birth, legal address, phone number, email address, and their employer info if they're employed. By info, just where you work. So that's what the owner has to have. For the beneficiary or the student's name, the social security number, date of birth, and legal address. That's what you absolutely need. There's also room to set up a successor owner, which is another adult that can assume control of the account if something were to happen to the owner. Um, because the owner does need to be 18, so it's not going to automatically just sort of default to that student. Um, you can set that up at the time of creating the account or later on. And I see we've got questions.
You just answered
Oh,
one.
okay.
That was great. Um, and then let's see. Um, can you just clarify on the tax deduction?
Oh,
So if
yep.
grandparent opens a 529 account, are they able to claim that contributions as tax deductions?
Yes, again, throat clearing that we're not tax professionals, but yeah, so if the law is written as if you're making those contributions, you can claim that as a deduction on your state income taxes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and then Jonathan, just in this presentation, are you just going to get into how, like, if people are ready to utilize those 529 funds, how they're able to do so?
Very generally at the end.
Okay, perfect. So
So,
we'll save
okay.
this one for the end.
Yeah, yeah. And I can talk from personal experience too, as I just had just done exactly that. So I know people want to know how you set up a U fund or how you set up a 529. This is how you can set up a U fund account. You take all that information that you needed from the previous slide. You can visit fidelity.com/ufund. There's a screenshot of it right there. You see that big green button that says open a 529 account. You can click that button and use again that information to complete the application. So you have to put in all that information for the owner, for the beneficiary, and then choose your investment options. Again, that's the last bit of it. There are a couple of questions in there that are kind of head scratchers, just and they are there because they have to be there legally. If you have any questions about those, you can call Fidelity, that's the number, or you can watch our walkthrough video that we did for the U Fund, where we kind of go through the U Fund application step by step and show how you do it. So, for example, there's a question about whether or not you or somebody in your household is a stakeholder or 10% shareholder in a publicly traded company or a FINRA or something. And to most people, that is really confusing. I would never know what it was if I didn't do this for a living. And I think it sort of people might see that and go, oh, I don't know if I should be filling this out. But you should be. It doesn't, it confuses 99% of people, that particular question, and the people who it does not confuse, they know who they are. So you might want to go ahead and just watch that video and see how you go through. The video itself takes about as long as it does to open an account, which is about 10 minutes. So it's a pretty easy process. And again, I can't stress enough, Fidelity's available over the phone. I believe it is 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. No, it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday and some hours on the weekends as well. I want to talk about strategies for saving. So what are some ways that people have successfully saved for college? So the biggest thing, start saving as early as possible. So using time to your advantage. It doesn't matter how much you save, save early. I would never tell anybody it's too late to save, and I know somebody asked if it was too late to save. Anything that you save is something that you don't have to borrow. So start putting money aside, even if you are a year out from college. People even put 529 money away when they're in college. So I would never say it is too late. You can start with a goal in mind, and we'll talk about that in a little bit greater detail later on. But even if you don't have a specific goal, you shouldn't get hung up on that. You start with whatever you can do. Taking advantage of unexpected funds like tax refunds, etc. Using automatic transfers. So we know that people who get money automatically taken out of their checking account on a periodic basis do really well. I always tell this story that after we set up my 529 for my son, I said to my wife, we got to start, we got to set up that contribution. She told me we had in fact been contributing for about 8 or 9 months. I just never saw it come out of my account, so I didn't know it was happening. So we know that people, that is a really effective tool to save. One of my favorite things is getting the word out and asking your family and friends to contribute. This image that you see here on the right is the gifting page that Fidelity has set up. So you can set up a gifting page, picture of your child, the year that they're anticipated to enter college, what they want to be when they grow up. And you can create a link and just email that link out to family and friends on like birthdays or other milestones, and people can gift money directly in using that link. So that is an awesome feature. I always love to talk about that, and I know people who have done it, and it's just such great, especially when really small children, don't really know that they're missing out on a toy, for example. But that's something that you can do. And then finally, involving your child in the process. I know kids like to see how much money they have. We already know that knowing that they have money saved for them for college is going to help them to go to college. But they like seeing the balance go up. And, I just in terms of getting people, getting your child to contribute to their own fund. God, I couldn't imagine doing that with my son, but I remember speaking with a financial aid person from a college who said that she made her daughter save half of everything she got and went into the college fund. And so, I always thought that was really cool because she told me not only did that help her pay for college, but it became a habit that she did for the rest of her life. Just put half of your money away as soon as you get it, which is so great. So it is possible. This is something that I wanted to call out because this is the college savings calculator that we have, and I know we had a lot of questions about how much money or how much your balance might grow. And so we have this tool on MEFA.org where you can put in your initial deposit, how much money you have, and we have $50 here. Maybe this is a baby steps person. And then let's say every month now I'm going to put in $75. My child's a newborn, so how much am I going to have by the time they're in college? And so it'll give you your contributions and your interest earned. And you can see here the calculator um, is estimating a 7% return over that time. And this is something that Fidelity has said this is in the average range, so it's doable. Same thing here, and it's a sort of a different way of looking at it. But if you're thinking about financing a $10,000 college cost, um, if you borrowed that full amount, which you can do, and MEFA's a lender, so I know this. I've seen people borrow. You can borrow whatever it is. If that's your cost and you want to borrow $10,000, you can do that. If you're repaying that over 10 years at a 7% interest rate, well, you're going to pay more than 10,000, right? So you're going to pay an extra $3,920 assuming 10 years at 7%. So it's going to cost you 13,920 to borrow that. Whereas if you save with 10,000 as a target, same rate of interest over the same time period, you'd only need to save 6,960. So really almost half is what it's going to cost you to save and earn the interest rather than borrowing the full amount and paying it. So a hypothetical, but I think it's a good way to illustrate that idea. And it's a good time now for us to talk about compound interest, which is interest growing on interest. And I have a question to ask you here. So in this hypothetical scenario here, Julie starts saving $50 per month in a 529 account when her child is first born, whereas Jonathan starts saving $100 per month in a 529 account beginning when his child is in the second grade. So that's me. Who will have more money saved when his child or her child turns 18? So if I can launch this poll question, I'm going to do it, and I want you to vote on who you think is going to have more funds. Me or Julie? I was going to say it's me. I'm not going to lie to you about this. Okay. So yeah, I don't think I got many of you to fall for it here. Most of you said Julie, 89% of you, and most of you were correct. So Julie's going to have more money. When she starts saving $50 per month when her child is first born, she's going to have, using again a 7% rate of return, $21,000 by the time her child goes to college, 21,536 to be exact. So that's 10,800 of what she contributed and about 10,036 of interest earned. So that's interest growing on interest. So that's using time to your advantage, right? So she's earned almost as much as she's put in. Just about. I mean, it feels wrong to say almost. It's just about. Now I didn't do too bad. I've got $19,798, but if you look at it, I had to put in $13,200 of my funds and earn just shy of $6,600 in interest. So I had to work a lot harder to come up to almost as much as Julie because I started not even particularly late. I mean, 7 years old isn't too late to start saving. But again, I still have a good amount saved. So I don't want to say it's too late if you didn't start saving when your child was first born, but using time to your advantage, even with a smaller amount, really helps. Oh, and I want to call this out too. This is our college planning tool that we have. And so many of you have this question that I would get all the time from parents, particularly of newborn children, who are over the moon about, having a new child, and they say, I want to make sure that college is bought, paid for by the time they go to college. How much do I need to put away every month to get that going? And that's really hard to tell, right? Because we don't know so many things. We don't know where they're going. We don't know how much financial aid they're going to receive. We don't know how much, what the market is going to do, etc. But there is a way that we can sort of help families to estimate, and that's by using the college planning tool. So if you go to MEFA.org, you go to planning for college, and you go to this planning tool, and you can start an account. Basically, that image that you see there is a graph, and you can start with the amount that you have. Say, okay, I have this much saved, and I've got this much that I'm going to save on a recurring basis. You can adjust the rate of return on that 7%, 6%, whatever you may, be, and it will calculate by the time your child is ready to go to college how much money that you will have. You can also start looking at colleges, specific types of colleges, and plug those in and say, by the time that my child is going to be going to this college, based on the increase in tuition every year, this is how much that college is going to cost by that time. So you have what college may cost, and you have what you may have to pay for it. And finally, if you put your income in, it'll give you some idea of how much financial aid you may be eligible to receive, right? So if you see in this example here, we have a future college cost of $59,995. That's for 1 year. We'll talk about that in a little more detail later on. This family is eligible for gift aid. That's grants and scholarships. That's money you don't have to pay back, so not loans, of $7,073. And based on what they're saving in the rate of return, they are scheduled to have about $32,000 saved to pay. So they're looking at a cost of about 60,000 and resources of about 40,000 on hand to pay for that. So they're looking at a $20,920 shortfall. And so you know then that if you're comfortable with that number, great. If you're not, you either need to start saving more, start looking at less expensive colleges, start applying for scholarships, which you can do through that site as well. And incidentally, you can start applying for scholarships very young. So grade school, you can start applying for college scholarships in some cases. So it's not too early to start doing that in all likelihood. And there's all sorts of different things that you can do on this particular tool. So this is just a little bit of it, but to me, it's kind of the heart of it. So if you want to know what should my goal be and how am I doing getting to that goal, you can look at the college planning tool. So again, here, 89% of respondents in that CSI study believe the value of a college education is worth the cost. So there is a cost to it, of course, but let's not forget that there are benefits and premiums that you get for that. Oh, one more thing on the getting family and friends involved. There are gift cards available that you can buy. There is a gift of college card that's branded with MEFA and with the U Fund that you can purchase at CVS stores throughout Massachusetts. You can go from any denomination up to $200 and have a tangible gift to give somebody towards saving for college. You can go in their 529, which can be used for college, but can also be used for those other expenses, including repaying student loans. So that's important. I know we're running late here, so I want to try to finish up as quickly as I can on how families pay for post-secondary education. Again, the most common question I've received over my time for MEFA. It's very common to hear stories that now cost $90,000, $100,000 to go to this particular college. And so you get the idea that that's how much college costs, right? Or it costs way too much, even if it's not that. But what I want to tell you is that there are different types of colleges that cost different amounts. So those numbers that we hear about every summer basically are the most expensive types of college and probably the most expensive college in your area. So this information comes from the College Board, Trends in College Pricing. The College Board does the SAT and the AP courses, but they also do this type of research. So the average annual cost for 1 year of a 4-year private college nationally is about $62,990 per year. So that includes tuition, fees, food and housing, books, supplies, transportation, all the costs put together. So that is a national average for 1 year. If you're in Massachusetts, if you're in the New England area, we're probably higher than that. But that is the national average, and that includes everything. So again, you may not be paying room and board, you may be, really depends, but this is everything all together. So that's one type, and it's the most expensive type. Then we have public colleges or universities, which are less expensive. Certainly if you are attending a public college in the state that you live in. So for an in-state resident going to a public college or university in Massachusetts, think about UMass, Bridgewater State, Framingham State, those types of colleges. The average cost is about $29,910 for in-state residents. If you're going to an out-of-state public college, it's going to be more than that. So about $49,000. So still a little bit less, but you're going to lose that in-state discount. Vocational training programs have talked about as being, 529 eligible in certain cases. So 15,070 for tuition only, and that comes from bestcolleges.com, how much does trade school cost? So that's for the entire education as well. Actually, I'm not sure if that's true, but 15,070 for tuition only. It's very difficult to tell for vocational training programs because they are so varied, and there's all different types, many of which are offered at the lowest cost type on the list here, which are the 2-year public community colleges. This says 20,570 per year, but I believe that includes room and board, and most 2-year public community colleges don't have those costs associated with it. So I think you can lop off about half of that. In Massachusetts, there are no community colleges that are not commuter colleges. So it's about $10,000. Actually, in Massachusetts, there's free community college. So and that is something that is, gaining popularity in, again, lots of different states and lots of different cities. For example, Boston had free community college before Massachusetts does. But in Massachusetts, it's free. So, the thing I want you to take from this is that it's not as simple as college costs $90,000 a year or $70,000 a year or $60,000 a year even. There's all sorts of different types of colleges with different price tags associated with them. And the second big thing is this is all before financial aid has been granted. So this is what's called the sticker price. And the fact is that most families are going to be eligible for some level of financial aid. The high cost of college, so to speak, is something that is generally very well understood or known. What isn't as well understood is the amount of financial aid that's granted every year. So in the most recent year that we have data for, $190 billion per year, and that's about where things typically stand. Aid, again, comes in two varieties, as I discussed before, merit-based, meaning scholarships, uh, or something that is given in recognition of student achievement, and need, which is based on the family's financial eligibility, of which your savings don't have an outsized impact, a very minimal impact. But there's a lot of money that's granted every year in terms of financial aid, and the fact is that most families are going to qualify for some of it. So again, that full cost of tuition times four isn't really necessarily the target that you should have in mind. So when it comes to people paying for college, how do they pay for college? First of all, financial aid. Once financial aid has been granted, there's only three ways to pay. Past income, meaning your savings, present income, meaning the money you're earning while your student is in college, and colleges do offer payment plans that you can get on and, for a small fee, interest-free monthly payment plan, you get on every dollar that you're paying every month goes against tuition. It's worth it to stretch what you can, maximize your aid, maximize your savings, and maximize your payment plan if you have one, because what's left after all of that is your future income or student loans. And this is important. This is a big important point to make at the end of this, which is that since we talk about student loans, people tend to think that students can borrow whatever they might need in their own name, as long as they, any amount basically, as long as they promise to pay it back after college. And that's just not true. I mean, most of the time, students need a co-applicant to be approved. There are federal student loans for students to take only, but they can only take, anywhere from 5,500 to 7,500 per year in that. And that's part of the financial aid package already. So anything after that, if you're looking to borrow 10,000 or 15,000, whatever it might be, that loan will have to be based on the approval of that will have to be based on credit. And most students don't have the credit or the income necessary to be approved, probably need a parent or somebody else to act as a co-applicant. And on that loan, a co-applicant would be equally responsible with the student. So you would be on the hook for that payment amount, which is why it is worth it to pay everything you can out of pocket before you start to borrow. Now, we have a slide about using your U fund savings. If you have 529, if you have a U fund, you can contact Fidelity to get those distributions out. You can, if you have the mobile app or online account access, you can direct the funds straight out of your account that way. That's what I did. We used our funds again to pay for K through 12 and just directed funds out of that. It was very easy to do electronically. Distributions can be made directly to a college or to a school, or they can be made to the owner. And I will say, we directed those funds out into our account, and the transfer itself took about 2 days. So that was the kind of time frame that we were looking at. If you do have the funds cashed out to yourself, keep a record of how you spent those funds, because you want to be able to prove to the IRS, should you get audited, that you use these funds for a qualified educational expense. Any distributions will trigger a 1099-Q, which is, just your tax form of what you took out of your account. And again, so should you get audited, you need to be able to say, this is how I use these funds, and I use them for a qualified educational expense. But payments can be made again electronically or via paper check, whether that's to an owner or to an institution. So next steps, you can start saving in a 529, or if you are, continue. Get the word out to family and friends. Maybe look at how much you're contributing on a monthly basis. See if you can bump it up if you're able to do so. Talking to your child about college and what they plan to do is really great. Not just what they plan to do, but have a cost conversation, right? Sometimes people make emotional choices because they don't have that information about cost and they don't really know how much they're going to be paying back. And it always more conversation is good around that topic. You can go to MEFA.org and use our online tools to learn more about saving for college, how you're doing saving for college, using that saving for college calculator, but also other calculators like calculating your SAI, your student aid index. You can sign up for our webinars or our emails. And then here I'll just leave you with our social media information if you wanted to follow us. We're posting stuff all the time, including scholarships. So if you're interested in scholarships, you know, we're contacted all the time by people offering them, asking us to promote them. So give us a follow that way. And then if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yes, so we have one question in the chat, and I'm not sure, Jonathan, if you can speak to this or maybe just point this person in a direction where they can find some of this information. So what's the average percentage earned from 529 given the numbers over the past 10 years?
Oh, I don't know that information. I think there may be some sort of industry-wide survey information about that. Of course, you know, there are, as we said, different offers, different program managers, and different investment choices. So certain investors and investment companies may outperform others, and there are certainly rankings, you know, of states and their performances. But industry-wide, I have a thought, but I'm not sure as far as a resource is concerned, where I could potentially point you. So maybe we can talk afterwards.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And that takes care of all the current questions.
All right. Well, thank you all very much, and good luck to you. And if you have any other questions about anything relating to planning, saving, and paying for college and career readiness, definitely give us a call or an email, and that's what we're here for. So thank you. Thank you, Apalila. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Good night.